All right. The day is in the midst of a year-long look at affordable housing in the region. What specifically do you think the legislature should do to help people who can't afford to buy a home or are struggling to rent an apartment?
Well, I do really like the way that the day has framed it and kind of going beyond that and not being have this like people can't get into the right house. And it's about people trying to avoid homelessness. As your article featured, there's been a lot of people who have been forced to live in motels who have that's been set up as essentially long-term housing for some people who are having it when it's really not a solution. And I think that what I would really like to see is us being able to have better zoning records for this one to allow for more affordable housing to be the type that's being built. You know, as you well know, we have some of the lowest vacancies in the country right now are in Connecticut, and it's because a lot of the housing that is available is too expensive for people, and just that there's simply not enough of it. Now, we always get into the issue of environmental policy when it comes to expanding housing, but I do think it's important that if we are building the correct type that also has more people living in a same area and hopefully with less of an effect on the environment. It'll, help out a lot of these towns that have seen their populations go down as well. And I don't know if this ties into that question as well for it, but it's also just about making our communities better. If people can live where they work, then it's less time driving, it's less strain on our roads, and it makes our communities better because those people can live and live in the same places that they work, and their communities are going to be better for it.
Okay. Connecticut recently enacted a law designed to provide safeguards against lawsuits for out of state patients seeking abortions in Connecticut and any provider who helps them. Do you support efforts to make Connecticut such a safe haven?
I would say that I absolutely do. I think that we need to do everything we can to protect access to healthcare in this state, and that's what we're doing by trying to do this. We are allowing, if we do not do this, then we are allowing people to simply try and, well, I guess the best way to say it would be to penalize people for what is like theoretically by the Supreme Court has been said is a states' rights issue, but then trying to make their state law apply to Connecticut. And I would very much like to see us be able to go beyond that and expand this, access for people. Try and make it as accessible that people can, well, feel that they can come here and be safe and not being worried about, as you said, facing prosecution or was it civil penalties in from their own states as well. I want to make sure that we are protecting, women in our state, and this is a key part of women's health care.
Okay. The state's surplus has grown to over $4 billion. Do you support the decision to use some of that to lower the state's pension debt, or do you think more should be returned to the taxpayer?
Well, I would say that I don't always like the way that's phrased because I very much am in favor of paying off that pension debt, especially as a teacher. But on top of that, that money is being returned to the taxpayer. It's paying off the money that the state owes to certain taxpayers who happen to be owed their money through a pension. I mean, obviously, yes, we would prefer it if the state didn't have any pension debt, but they do. And so we want to use some of that money to pay down the state's debts. That's supposed to be what we should want to do in general. I'm actually a little surprised, I should say, that even to have Republicans speak out against it. We should want to pay off states' debts, right?
All right. How should Connecticut move forward to address climate change with regard to electric vehicles, wind power, and other clean energy strategies?
Yes. Well, I did appreciate what the legislature did and being able to try and add in things like teaching about climate change to our curriculum. I think it's really important that we include that because we can expect that kids must be learning something about it, but I want to make sure that it's incorporated into what we do and say this is an effect of climate change. But on top of that, what I really do want to see is I think that we are getting to the point where moving to hybrid and electric vehicles will likely be something that I think will happen certainly in my lifetime. But I would like to see us push to having more green vehicles, having more green energy, having more of the energy that we produce and use here in Connecticut be, either carbon neutral or simply, better for the environment. But what I also want to see is efforts that we can do to reduce some of those emissions in ways that maybe we don't always think about. I'm a big proponent of having our towns more walkable, more bikeable, having better public transportation, more public transportation that people can easily access, because those strategies are very good at preventing, or I suppose, keeping people from needing to drive everywhere. And obviously, as we know, we're a commuter state. People have to drive everywhere. And I would really like it if we could reduce the number of people who need to be on the road in order for us to, well, reduce our carbon emissions. And not only that, but it also makes our towns better. Isn't it going to be better if we have less people needing to drive everywhere? We talked about during COVID, people loved the idea of being able to eat outdoors more, being able to have these streets and be able to walk around. Where the community I live, I'm lucky enough in downtown Niantic that we're able to go out and walk around to restaurants, walk around to the beach. That's amazing, but it's frustrating to go just like a mile or two down the road, and people can't do that because there's not really an easy way to walk there. There's not an easy way to bike there. And I say that as someone who's been biking all around town, that it is difficult at times because there's not a shoulder a lot of the times. It's just you're in the lane with traffic and you hope you don't get hit by a car. And that's not something we can ask our children to do. But it would be very nice if we could make these communities safer for people to do that so that we didn't have to be on the road as much. I think that everyone would benefit from that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I suppose that was good timing for that one. Is that answer the question direct enough? I don't know if, I know I kind of went off on that one a little bit.
That was great. Do you think the 2020 election was conducted fairly and Joe Biden won? Do you support early voting and voting by mail initiatives?
Sorry, I'm a
that's
little
two
surprised
different
that is a serious question. The idea that Joe Biden wasn't elected legitimately is just laughable. I mean, you might as well say that ask me. I'm not insulting you for that one, but it's like asking me if I think the earth is flat. It's like, yes, Joe Biden won. Of course the election was conducted fairly. I know that I didn't get to work in that one because as a teacher, I have to work on election days, but I did actually get to do something that I always wanted to do and got to work at the primary. I would say that one, in a primary in which we pretty much had it wrapped up of who was getting the nominations at that point for the Connecticut presidential primary, it was still conducted in a very, very well overseen manner. We had people counting, Democrat ballots, counting our Republican ballots. There was independent people there to verify that we were properly counting them. We haven't been able, no one on the saying the opposite of this has been able to produce a shred of evidence that this has been in any way conducted unfairly. I teach social studies. I teach civics. I show my students the number of cases that we've had of convicted voter fraud in this country. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said it with the air quotes. That's going to look immature. That's what I say to my students. Who has said it with voter fraud in this country, and there's almost the number of cases is minuscule. And the number of the times it happens, it tends to be someone submitting an individual ballot in which they are like twice, essentially, either with the same name and it's someone misconstrued, or it's somebody trying to submit for like their dead mother or something like this. And I mean, this whole concept is just being done to placate Donald Trump. And I think it's really disgusting that we do have to even ask a question like that, because the Connecticut GOP and the national GOP should have the ability to say, no, this was conducted fairly, because there is no reason to suspect that it was not. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't remember what the second part of the question was.
I should have waited to ask it. Do you support early voting and voting by mail?
Absolutely. Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you. I absolutely support that. Sorry. I absolutely support early voting and voting by mail. I would tell you that I never voted absentee until this most recent election in 2020 and 2021. I voted absentee, and I do appreciate that we have to make some, I shouldn't say significant changes. We have to make changes at our state constitution in order to allow for that to happen for us. But I think it's a great thing. I think the more people we can get voting, the better. I mean, personally, I would love to see us either move the day for election day to the weekend or make it be a national holiday. It's something that we talk about in my social studies classes a lot with kids, of like, why do we do it on this random Tuesday when everyone's working? And it's just because we always have. That's always the answer. But I would love to see, early access voting. Yeah, you can just show up whenever you want, in the week before the election. Or, yeah, if you want an absentee ballot, we're going to send everyone an absentee ballot request form. I mean, states do this as Oregon does this and everyone votes absentee. And they have great voter turnout. There aren't really any cases of voter fraud for it. To even bring it up is as I said, it's pretty ridiculous. And if anything, I would feel like absentee voting would be even more secure. But, I mean, I don't really know if there's anything else to add for that one. But yes, I am absolutely in favor of, early access voting by absentee for no excuses, anything we can do to get more people to vote in that case.
Okay. All right, now the final question is the one that I devised to ask you about your district, or potential to your district in East Lyme. So how do you see the long and drawn-out Oswegatchie Hills development saga ultimately ending? And do you think the land should be preserved, and if so, how? And let me put one thing in here. I know Paul Formica this year requested $10 million in bonding to purchase that land. So what do you...
I can safely say that I don't always feel comfortable saying that I am an expert on all things for a lot of this stuff. I am in favor of us building, obviously, affordable housing, and I would like to see more build. I am also a big believer, though, that we need to be doing, as a coastal community, preserving open space. That's why I want to make sure that when we're building our housing, that we're doing it in an intelligent way and in a safe way. And whenever we develop open space, and I know that Oswegatchie Hills is not the only plan for development coming up, or the current one that's being built in East Lyme, and I would very much like to see us approach this with as comprehensive a study as we can of what kind of effect this is. Because, as you said, with climate change, this is only going to get worse. We are going to have more and more intense storms. And if we do not have the open space to be able to absorb those storm some, then it will cause more and more flooding, more and more burden on the taxpayer to have to pay for the effects of those flooding. And every time we see a new development, every time we see an area that is pushing into the wetlands, pushing into an area that previously was left undeveloped, I get very, very concerned, because I do not want to see our coastal communities just get ruined. And that's honestly my number one concern. The closer we build it to the shore, the more concerned I get about it. I know Oswegatchie's isn't directly on the shore, but it's very, very close. And I just want to see that we're doing more, especially in East Lyme, to make sure that we are building our town in the way that will keep it there for as long as possible.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Is that the...
Yeah.
It makes sense for you?
Yes.
Okay. And I do apologize. I wasn't sure if I could go back and fix my thing. I didn't know I didn't have to redo my question, but